What is up, guys? My name is Craig. Welcome to my first ever YouTube video. This video is going to be a video essay on how to make the perfect open world game. I made a nice, intricate, well-detailed flowchart here of all of the components that I feel ideally make the perfect open world game. Now, guys, first and foremost, let me just start by saying that unfortunately, a lot of open world games today are not made with quality. A lot of games are just open world for the sake of being open world. They're just open world so they could be more marketable, so they could sell more. They're not open world because they were meant to be open world. And that's a shame. It's very unfortunate. Because I think if an open world game is developed properly, it can truly stand the test of time and become something magnificent in the long run. So let me just start by saying that I feel like a lot of open world games today are very bland, very stale. They're convoluted with a lot of bullshit, and they're empty. They don't offer anything new or original. They don't take any risks, and the player oftentimes can just feel like the world is filled with nothing but filler, right? So it's just very unfortunate, and it sucks. So we're going to dive into this flowchart that I made. I'm going to read you guys everything that I wrote, and feel free to agree, disagree in the comments. And yeah, so let's get into it. Let's see what I have to say, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this video. So this flowchart is how to make the perfect open world game. Here is my little video essay, all right? So what is an open world, right? Let me define what an open world game is for those of you who don't know what an open world game is. So an open world game is a type of video game that allows players to freely explore a vast immersive environment with minimal restrictions. Unlike linear games, which guide players through a predetermined path, an open world game provides a sandbox-like experience where players can choose their own paths, engage in various activities, and interact with a dynamic world at their own pace. These games often feature a rich narrative, side quests, and opportunities for character development, offering players a high degree of freedom and the ability to shape their own adventures within the game's expansive setting. So that is what an open world game is to me, and generally speaking, I think that's what a lot of people would think of when they think of an open world game, right? Okay, so that leads us to what makes a good open world, right? So I'm gonna split what makes a good open world game into two sections, into two major components, and that is side content, which is blue, and main content, which is red. Anything in red belongs to main content, and anything in blue belongs to side content, okay? So what makes a good open world is split into two vital components, side content and main content. And also, I don't think this just applies to open world games, I think this applies to video games, period. So let's start off with side content. Secrets. Although Dark Souls 3 is a linear game, it is a perfect example of a game and many other Soul games that reward the player for seeking out secrets. In the case of Dark Souls 3, hitting certain walls with your weapon will reveal secret passages that can potentially lead to an unknown treasure chest, and sometimes even an extension of that level. By applying secrets to an open world, it makes the world feel multi-layered, which is a good thing, giving the player a sense of depth in this world, incentivizing further exploration and wonder. Secrets are so imperative to make your world feel fully fleshed out, right? I mean, when you, the player, find a secret in an open world, it gives you a sense of importance, it gives you a sense of fulfillment, it gives you a sense of happiness. Like, wow, I found this on my own. I had no prior knowledge that this secret wall was here, but I found it, right? So I think secrets are, a nice little add-on to your open world. It just makes your world feel truly fleshed out. Memorable side quests. So, memorable side quests are imperative for a quality open world. In fact, I would argue they are more important than the actual main quest line. Main quests can sometimes be unenjoyable just because of the sole fact that they are basically an obligation to the player. There's no way around them. You must complete them in order to progress through the game. However, side quests are not an obligation, so you might as well make them fun and memorable, so that way, memorable that the player wishes that they were an obligation. Sometimes side quests even make up for the lackluster main quests, so they are vital components. Memorable side quests incentivize the player to explore the world further, to interact and do things that they normally wouldn't ever do, adding further depth to the game that they are immersing themselves in. Ronnie the Witch's side quest from Elden Ring was a memorable one because it revealed new enemy types, expanded upon the lore of the game, and rewards the player with the Moonlight Greatsword upon completion of the quest, which is arguably one of the most memorable, fun to use weapons in the game. I absolutely love the Moonlight Greatsword in Elden Ring specifically, but more so in Bloodborne. But anyway, I digress. Memorable side quests should reward the player in a myriad of ways because they are optional and they take away additional time from the player. So the least that we can do is reward them for their time to complete these side quests. Guys, side quests are so imperative to an open world, okay? Like, they are a giant chunk of what make an open world game an open world game. And this is the thing, like, I think of Nier Automata, I think of Nier Replicant, specifically Nier Replicant. A lot of the side quests in Nier Replicant I felt were very lackluster, very forgettable, very tiresome. I felt I hate fetch quests, you know? I think fetch quests are really boring. Like, oh, my chicken laid 7 eggs, 5 of them are missing. Can you go find them? You know, that's not a memorable side quest. You want side quests that reward the player for their time. You want side quests that are memorable, you know, that have some sort of grand importance to them, you know? So I can't emphasize that enough. Side quests, memorable side quests to me are not, oh my God, I lost my kitty in a tree. Go find them. For like, fuck that shit, bro. That's not memorable. That's not fun. It's just so many open world games are convoluted with side quests that are like that. And I just can't stress enough how annoying it is. If as a player, it feels like a waste of time. It just sucks. It really sucks. Moving on. Random instances. Something that makes our very world lively and fascinating is the case of the unknown. You never know what is going to happen within your day once you step out that front door. Random instances can occur at any given moment, giving you tons to talk about when your day has come to an end. Random instances, when done correctly, give the world more of a realistic type of feeling, giving off the vibe that anything can happen at any given moment. This keeps things exciting and the player on their toes. This needs to be replicated in an open world in order to keep things refreshing and suspenseful. I can't tell you how many times I was just allowing my archer to remain idle in Dragon's Dogma 2. And then a gigantic griffin swoops in out of nowhere and a grand battle begins. I love random instances like this. It keeps the open world alive. I 100% agree with, obviously I agree with everything that I wrote in this flowchart, but I definitely love random instances. You know, random instances break the, you know, they just break the normal flow of a game, right? They allow for things to happen in the game that you typically wouldn't expect. And when we go out, like I said, when we go out into the world, you know, there's no guarantee that good things are going to happen to us, and there's no guarantee that bad things are going to happen to us. It's completely random. Who knows what's going to happen, right? But that's the beauty of going out into the world, right? Into the real world. So I think that should be replicated in video games as well. It just adds further depth into your game, into your open world game, and it just adds another layer to the game overall. So random instances, can't stress it enough. They are so important. And I think they also contribute to the memorability. I think I'm saying that right, of a game. Like, you know, you could tell your friend, oh my God, bro, remember that time we were constructing this castle and out of nowhere, this ogre comes out of the forest and attacks us? You know, like it wasn't scripted. It wasn't a scripted event. It just happened. Like, you know, when things like that, when you allow for random instances like that to occur in a game, it really just makes the player feel like, wow, this is a real world. This is not a scripted world. This is a world where anything can happen at any given moment. And this is what makes it special. So random instances are so imperative. They're so vital to an open world, because an open world, anything can happen, man. You go out that front door, it's an open world. You know, listen, I live in New York, and I can tell you right now, going to Manhattan, you best believe there are tons of random instances, good and bad, that can happen. Okay, unfortunately, more bad. So, you know, you want to replicate that in your video game. You know, it makes the game feel less of a video game and more of an actual breathing, living, ever-shaping world. Let's go on to photo mode, okay? Every game should have a photo mode, but even more so for open world games. Having a really efficient photo mode in your open world game incentivizes the player to explore the world further, backtracking to a different area or looking for a new spot altogether to get that perfect photo to capture. In our everyday life, we take photos of beautiful vistas and scenery alike. Why should that be any different for a world in a video game? If you spent so many years on a project crafting a beautiful world, it's only right to include a photo mode that shows off all the hard work you have done. I love photo modes, and to be honest with you, it's such a giant disappointment for me when a game that I truly love, especially a beautiful open world game, when it doesn't have a photo mode. It just feels like a giant letdown, right? I mean, think about it. You and your team spent years and years and years developing this game, and you don't have a photo mode. You should have a photo mode, because a photo mode creates a sense of community for a game. You know, everybody's showing off their favorite vistas, their favorite landmarks, their favorite parts of the game. It just overall creates a sense of community. And it just, you know, and also video game photography, like this video that I linked here, it's becoming an art form in itself, man. More and more people are taking photos in their favorite games and sharing it online because they just love the game that much. So I think adding a photo mode allows for your fan base to not only show their love for the game itself, but it incentivizes for them to go back into your game, to go back into that world and travel to their favorite parts of that game and exploit that. You know what I mean? It allows for the player to go back and discover new locations to showcase the beauty of those locations. So I think photo mode is so detrimental, and it's so, it's something that gets overlooked, unfortunately, in a lot of games. So I think in 2024, I think a photo mode is a must in your open world game, and just in games, period, you know? So many beautiful artistic things that people can do in a photo mode. So now we get to good incentives to collect resources. Although Starfield gets a bad rap for, well, a lot of things that it does wrong, for good reason, okay? One thing I felt it did right was giving the player good incentives to venture out into the world and collect resources. In Starfield, you can venture out and explore a myriad of different planets. And what makes each planet special is how each planet houses different materials or elements for the player to gather. In order to modify certain weapons or build certain contraptions, players need to go out there and collect the materials responsible. This makes the player more conscious of the world around them, being on the lookout for certain plants, materials, etc. It incentivizes the player to go back into the world and to care about their surroundings. And when they finally collect all the resources they need, they can now be rewarded with crafting that new weapon or contraption that they desired. Additionally, To avoid the tediousness of having to venture out time and time again looking for resources, Starfield grants the player the ability to construct contraptions that gather resources for the player instead, similar to oil rigs or wind turbines. This allows the player to come back to the bases they built on several planets, collect the resources the machinery have gathered for them, and move on. So the ability to create machinery that collects resources for you can be a great solution for players who find resource collecting tedious after a while, as it speeds up the process but still incentivizes the player to come back to a different area at the end of the day. In our everyday world, we extract the Earth's resources for better or for worse to benefit our personal lives. Open world games should replicate this as well, as it incentivizes for the player to care about their surroundings and gives them a reason to return to previous areas. It is imperative, however, that the player collects resources for a reason that is worth it, not something boring like simply repairing a sword or a vehicle. Exactly. Like, if you're gonna have your players go out into the world and collect resources, make sure it's for a reason that has some sense of importance or has some sense of grand purpose. Similar to the memorable side quest component, unfortunately, a lot of open world games have their players go out into the world to collect resources for very tiresome and boring reasons. Like, oh, you need to repair your vehicle, so go out in the world and collect resources to repair your vehicle. That's not a good reason. That's not a good, that's just not a good reason for your player to go out into the world to collect resources, okay? Create more original, worthwhile reasons for your player to go out in the world to collect resources. Because collecting resources, I think, is definitely imperative for an open world because, like I stated, it incentivizes the player to go out there, explore the world, be aware of their surroundings. But, at the same time, though, it's a double-edged sword because if the player's out there collecting resources time and time again, going to the same planet or the same area time and time again, it can be very tedious. It can become very mentally draining. So it's also important for there to be kind of like in Starfield, right? Like you can construct machinery that pumps out those materials for you, right? So you're not, collecting resources all the time. So I think that there also needs to be a method where collecting resources can be sped up. So that way it prevents the player from getting very just bored going out there and collecting resources 24/7, So I think that's very important as well, and that needs to be stated as well, I do think as a whole, though, that collecting resources is one of the key components for an open world, right? Because like I said in this component right here, I mean, in the real world, we extract the Earth's resources for better or for worse, but overall, I think that it's good for the player to collect resources in the world because, it just gives the player another thing to do in that open world. Once again, it incentivizes for them to go out into the world and pay attention to the things that are in the world, like certain plants, certain rocks, certain materials, like I said before. So, I definitely think they are vital for an open world. However, I think the way you approach collecting resources is very detrimental as well, because it can kind of become similar to like fetch quests, right? Like you don't want that. You want your player to feel like, okay, I'm traveling into the world to collect these resources for a good purpose, and the overall process to getting those resources aren't so tiresome. So it's very important that, the player is collecting resources for A, a good cause, and B, make sure that the whole process of getting to those resources isn't tiresome and isn't boring, because then it just becomes, mentally draining to go out there in the world and collect resources. So let's talk about mini games, okay? Mini games are crucial to an open world because they are the little details that create massive depth to a game. They allow the player to take a break from how the game typically plays. For this example, I shall use Tekken Ball. It's a simple but very fun mini game that allows for players to get away from beating the crap out of one another, even for a brief moment, as Tekken is a fighting game. This gives the player a sense of optionality, allowing them to partake in something new and different. By adding mini games throughout the open world, it incentivizes the player to A, spend more additional time in the world, and B, to explore more parts of the world in hopes of finding more mini games. In short, they create further depth to a game, giving the player more reasons to play. I think mini games are so overlooked and so underrated. I think if a mini game is developed properly, sometimes people can end up loving the mini game more than the actual game, you know? But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You want to make mini games of that caliber. You want to make mini games of that quality, you know? Because once again, it just incentivizes the player. It just gives the open world another layer, right? It just creates further depth to the open world. It allows the player to take a break from, what you're typically doing in the game for something new, something different. So mini games are so important because I consider mini games as kind of like that break period, right? Where, okay, like I'm not doing what the game typically wants me to do. I'm doing something new. I'm doing something other than what I'm typically doing in the game. And, that could just make the player feel good. And also, it could be a great way to decompress, right? Like, for example, Tekken, right? Like, Tekken is very heavy on combos. It's very heavy on execution. It's very heavy on timing, on its myriad of different fighting mechanics. But when you play Tekken Ball, all that goes away. Now it's just you and the character that you chose, and you're just bouncing a ball back and forth with the other person you're playing with, right? It went from complexity to simplicity, right? So sometimes when you have mini games that do that, it can allow for the player to just decompress, chill out. It's just a good overall break from what the game is typically known for or what the game is typically played for, So mini games are very imperative. It's just another component to what adds to the open world. It's just another reason for the player to go out there and explore the open world. But let me say this too. Mini games need to be more original, okay? Like, we're seeing a lot of the same type of mini games, like, little time limits on how fast you can collect things or, things of that nature, right? It's very important to create mini games that are original as well in concept, That's very important too. You don't just want mini games that people have played time and time again. You don't want your game to have mini games that other open world games have, okay? You want mini games that other open worlds don't have. You want mini games that are unique, that are creative. That's what you want, right? Because that is also going to separate your open world, your game from the rest of them. So remember that mini games are important, but also what kind of mini game is it? What do your mini games do that other mini games and open world games haven't done? So that's important. And I don't think that gets spoken about enough either, right? It's like, okay, we want mini games, but we not only want mini games of high quality, we want mini games of originality, okay? We want mini games that are different, okay? Because that is ultimately what's just going to make your game a better product at the end of the day. Collectibles. Let's talk collectibles, guys. I mean, come on. Collecting the Fallout bobbleheads. Every time I collected a Fallout bobblehead, I felt good. I was like, and then when you go to your house and you see them being displayed in your house, I don't know. It's little things like that I just feel further contribute to your open world, It's just like, oh, that's cool. Like, I have a little collection of the things that I collected throughout the world. How sick is that? You know what I mean? So collectibles are not a necessity for an open world game, but I think that they are definitely a really worthwhile side task for an open world game to have. Collectibles in your open world give players more incentive to explore every inch of it, especially if they are placed in spots that are very intriguing to explore. Although they are not a necessity, they definitely make for a cool little addition to a game, granting another activity for the player to indulge in, even if it is considered to be a minor side task. I think the placement of collectibles is also something that needs to be spoken about, right? Because you don't want collectibles to be placed too frequently from, you want to space them out from one another, right? And you want them to be placed in areas in a game that you think the player will truly love, right? So like maybe put a collectible at the top of a temple, maybe put a collectible at the bottom of a volcano without dying. You want to put your collectibles in areas that are unique, areas that are enticing, areas that the player will enjoy exploring in. That's not spoken about enough. Is not only for the game to have collectibles, but where are the collectibles being placed? How far are the collectibles are from one another? How close are they to one another? Like, you want to make sure that the collectibles are spread apart far from one another, and you want to make sure that they're placed in areas that would be fun for the player to explore and fun for the player to experience. So yeah, collectibles are definitely important. I think collectibles are a nice little addition to an open world to give the open world more flavor. And listen, a lot of people love collecting things. I mean, me personally as a gamer, I don't really care for collectibles, but I do like them. I'm not crazy about them, but I do like them. Like I said earlier on, I did like how every time I collected Fallout bobblehead, a Pip-Boy bobblehead, I loved how they would show up in my house in Fallout. Like, it was just awesome. It's little things like that just give the game more personality, you know what I mean? And more detail. So, although I may not be crazy about collectibles, I definitely recognize their worth in a game, especially in an open world game. And I think that if you're going to have collectibles in a game, don't have them in a game just because every other open world has them in their game. Have collectibles in a game. And also, maybe I don't know, for example, I think of God of War 2018, right? Like the way they did collectibles in that game. The ravens, right? Like Odin's ravens, like how you had to collect all of the ravens by hitting them with your axe, and you heard the ravens through sounds that they would make, and it would make the player look for them and look in different directions in the world. Interactive collectibles like that, I think, are so vital to a game. And they just contribute to the overall execution of a game when it comes to the little fine details in an open world. So I think collectibles, don't just have collectibles for the sake of having collectibles, but I think the execution of how you put the collectibles in the world really matters. And, just like where you place them as well. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but I need to emphasize these points because this is overall how you're going to make your open world more better, in terms of side content. And speaking of side content, that is all of the components I have for side content. The blue section is over. We have officially conquered the blue section, guys. So that's everything I have for side content. Let me know if I'm missing anything. And let's head over to main content. Before I go to main content, though, I just want to add that Sons of the Forest is another great example of a game that forces the player to go out in the world to collect resources for a good incentive. I mean, if you look at any gameplay of Sons of the Forest or the game that came before it, The Forest, chopping down trees to make a house, it just felt so good, so satisfying. It's one of the few games that I think really did a phenomenal job with having the player go out there and collect resources for not only a good purpose, but it just didn't feel tiresome. Like, I enjoyed the cutting animation of the axe. And I don't know, I just think the Sons of the Forest did a phenomenal job, and The Forest, the game that came before it, I think those games do a phenomenal job of making the player go out in the world, explore the world for good incentives. So I need to add that as well. Check out Sons of the Forest and The Forest. Those games are phenomenal for what they do. Alright guys, we officially completed the side content of this video. Now we're going to the main content, the meat and potatoes. This is what truly makes an open world game an open world game, okay? Not saying that the side content isn't as important, but I mean the main content, come on man. Like this is like what will make your game either a magnum opus or just another bullshit Ubisoft clone, open world clone, okay? So main content is so important, it's so detrimental. This is what's going to ultimately make or break your game. This is ultimately what's going to make your game a memorable experience or a utterly forgettable experience to the point where people don't ever want to touch your game ever again, okay? So main content, can't stress it enough, very, very important for an open world game. So let's go into the red territory, which is main content. Let's start off with interesting NPCs, okay? Here we got our old buddy Harold from Fallout 3, one of my favorite side quests, Oasis. That's the side quest that he's from. So anyway, interesting NPCs are imperative for an open world to feel alive and fascinating. Take Harold from Fallout 3 side quest Oasis. Harold is the result of a mutation that has turned him into a half-human, half-tree monstrosity. His unique appearance made others around him view him as a deity of some sort. But in actuality, Harold is far from that. He is just a man who wants to be freed from his misery of this unfortunate mutation. Harold's original backstory, lore, and his grotesque appearance alongside his southern accent made him an immensely memorable NPC. Why? Because it is something the player won't typically see very often in an open world game. When was the last time you spoke to a tree man monster with a Texan accent? I would imagine hardly ever. NPCs are what make or break an open world because they are the open world. They are the very inhabitants you will engage with time and time again. Interesting NPCs reward the player for their travels through the land, through engaging dialogue, being given a fun side quest, informing the player on new lore, etc. Unfortunately, I feel like in today's day and age, man, not a lot of games have a lot of memorable NPCs like Harold. Like, Harold is the result of risk taking. Okay, because look at his design, man. I mean, can we look at this? Look at the guy's design. It's so unique. It's so original. I can name you tons of NPCs that have blonde hair or that, you know, I don't know. They just look like your typical NPC. But Harold here, Harold is a one of a kind, man. Not only do we need more NPCs in an open world that matter, we need more NPCs in an open world that are unique, that are original in terms of persona, original in terms of visuals, the way they look, their design, their overall presentation. Harold, to me, is one of the most memorable NPCs ever, in my opinion. I think he's so underrated. I don't think a lot of people talk about his backstory, his lore. I absolutely loved the side quest Oasis. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of open world games today. We're focusing so much on the graphics. We're focusing so much on the grand scale, how big an open world is. We're not focusing on what's important, and what's important are the people within your world, man. They're the ones that give you memorable side quests, if the side quest is memorable. They're the ones that expand the lore of the game. They're the ones that give you a sense that this world has personality and depth and charisma. Well, I guess charisma falls under personality, but you know what I'm trying to say here, people. Harold is a perfect example of what every NPC should look like or be like in a game. I also have other honorable mentions, okay? We got Solaire. Solaire from, Dark Souls, okay? Claptrap from Borderlands, okay? Like, we need more NPCs like this that are memorable, that really have their own identity. And unfortunately, a lot of open world games do not have NPCs that have much of an identity. They're very boring. Their dialogue, their phrases are very just robotic. It's heavily lacking, man. It's heavily lacking. We need more Claptraps. We need more Solaires. We need more Heralds. NPCs like Solaire, Claptrap, Herald, they just give the world flavor. They give the world color. They give the world vibrancy, So, I can't emphasize it enough, man. Like, we don't have NPCs. We don't have good, interesting NPCs in our open world games these days, man. We really don't. We need more of them. And a lot of NPCs tend to have the same archetypes, the same personas, the same, it just sucks, Like I said before, when was the last time you saw a man tree mutation thing? Who you actually feel pretty bad for. The guy wants to be freed from this mutation. He wants you to kill him. He wants you to go underground and destroy his heart. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, when was the last time you ran into an NPC in a recent open world game that had a lore as in-depth as Harold's? Or a backstory as much as Harold's. You know what I'm saying? Like, we just don't have that, unfortunately, in a lot of open world games. A lot of open world games are prioritizing the wrong thing. They're prioritizing more of the physicality aspect of the world instead of the actual content. And the bulk of content in an open world that makes an open world game fun is the NPCs. I can't stress it enough, man. We need more interesting NPCs. We need more original NPCs like Harold, like Solaire from Dark Souls, and like Claptrap. We don't have enough of them. So I can't stress this enough, okay? We gotta stop focusing on, oh, this open world is so big, even though there's absolutely nothing in it. Yeah, there's nothing in it because you don't have any interesting NPCs. It's just sad, bro. We're focusing on the wrong things when it comes to open world games. We're focusing on how many pointless weapons are in the game. We're focusing on how big and empty spaces, how big of an empty space we can create, but that is also simultaneously visually pleasing to look at. Like, we're focusing on the wrong thing, man. Interesting NPCs like Harold are so important. They make us question what's going on in the world that we are immersing ourselves in. They give us a greater sense of wonder in the world that we're immersing ourselves in. I can't stress it enough. Interesting NPCs are so important. And that's why I say Fallout 3, in my opinion, is one of the greatest RPGs of all time, along with New Vegas. Fallout 3 and New Vegas did a phenomenal job at providing the player with interesting NPCs to engage with, because those NPCs just expanded the lore of the game. They made the player resonate and empathize with the NPC that they're talking to. They generate more questions to the player. Like, when I was talking to Harold, I was thinking, when I first ran into Harold, I was thinking, oh my God, how did you turn into the tree? When did you turn into this tree? Are you able to move any part of your limbs, or are you completely, is it kind of like you're frozen in stone? Like, how does it feel being a tree monstrosity? Like, so many different things were popping through my mind when I interacted with Harold, when I interacted with Solaire, when I interacted with Claptrap. You know, when I interacted with even when I interacted with Ludwig from Bloodborne, one of my favorite boss battles of all time. When you kill Ludwig in Bloodborne, after you defeat him, you can only talk to his decapitated head. And I was like, oh my fucking God, bro, I'm talking to a decapitated head right now. What the fuck is going on? And you talk to Ludwig and he reveals more things to you. And I thought that was so awesome, because typically when you defeat a boss, that's it, you know? But you can actually continue talking to Ludwig even after the battle, even though he's obviously in his dying moments. But still, that was really cool. And, you know, I just really liked that whole interaction, and I found Ludwig to be a very interesting NPC even after the fact of fighting him in that epic boss battle. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. Interesting NPCs. I mean, listen, I could make a whole other video about how drastically important and vital and crucial and imperative they are to make an open world game badass, okay, and memorable and awesome. So yeah, interesting NPCs, can't stress it enough. Very imperative to making an open world game memorable and amazing, okay? Let's carry on to environment variety. Although this is not a necessity for an open world to be good, it is definitely strongly recommended. When an open world game has a good amount of different types of terrain, climates, environments, etc., it gives the player a sense of variety in the world. It prevents the world from getting stale or feeling flat. Oftentimes in our everyday-to-day life, it can get pretty boring or tedious, seeing the same type of scenery every day. This is... Sorry, I lost myself. This is why many, this is why many go on vacations, go to different states, countries, etc. By having an open world that showcases a vast variety of different vistas, it allows the player to differentiate the area one is traversing through, giving the open world personality and depth, especially if each environment has its own individual color palette or theme to it. This was one of the problems with Rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin, a lot of the areas that I traversed through felt the same. And, you know, that can make a game feel just very samey, very uninspired. And by the way, I like Rise of the Ronin, okay? I know a lot of people don't like that game. That game gets a bad rap. But personally, I love Rise of the Ronin. I think the gameplay element, at least in that game, was done beautifully. Although I suck at pairing in that game, it's so hard. But anyway, I digress. Environment variety is, it's not a necessity, right? I mean, I was talking about Fallout 3, right? With Harold, right? Like I was talking about Fallout 3, right? And I consider Fallout 3 to be one of the most badass, best RPGs of all time. And, Fallout 3 really didn't have a lot of environment variety, right? I mean, the Capital Wasteland pretty much looked the same no matter where you went, no matter what direction you went down, right? So, environment variety isn't necessarily a must for an open world game, right? Because once again, you can have an open world game that doesn't have environment variety, but is still badass, like Fallout 3. But, I just think that it helps, it just gives the player a sense of, okay, this is where I was, this is where I'm at now, right? It allows the player to identify different parts of the game, and it also just gives the game more variety, more flavor, more, more depth, and more of an identity, And I think that's one of the things that I absolutely love about Ghost of Tsushima. And by the way, Ghost of Tsushima is one of my favorite games of all time. I'm playing the PC port and I love it. But Ghost of Tsushima does this so well. Every environment, Iki Island doesn't look like Tsushima Island, you know what I mean? And you know what I'm saying? Like, Ghost of Tsushima just has a lot of different variety when it comes to its scenic vistas, and I think that can just make your game just better, man. It just makes your game better, and it just gives the player a sense of like, okay, once again, this is where I was, but this is where I'm at now, And also, it's a great way to visually show off your game. and show off all of the different types of terrain and climates that that you and your team have worked so hard to achieve successfully in a game. So environment variety, it's not a must, it's not a necessity, right? Not every open world game needs it in order to be a phenomenal open world, but I think it's a good plus to have. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to choices that can permanently alter things. Here's another Fallout 3 example. Fallout 3 Megaton Explosion. It is not very often that we receive an open world game where our choices can permanently alter the game itself, or a part of it anyway, and that is a pity. Providing choices of this magnitude truly gives a sense of power and responsibility to the player, as well as being downright impressive. I always think about the dormant nuke in the small town of Megaton in Fallout 3. The player has the ability to either disarm the nuclear threat, or become the devil himself and arm the bomb to obliterate the entire town of Megaton, killing tons of innocent people. If the player chooses to take that insidious route, the town is permanently marked off the map, with the area itself physically altered forever. Additionally, certain NPCs will view you with immense negativity due to your evil choice of action, while others may view you in a positive light for what you did. Scenarios like this truly make the player feel like their choices matter in the open world, especially if they can alter the world physically, as it constantly reminds the player of the choice that they now have to live with. It is imperative for open world games to have more scenarios like the case of Megaton. This makes the player feel like they can make a significant difference in the world they are playing in, for better or for worse. And man, I cannot stress this enough. There are not enough instances in open world games today where a choice can forever change a certain part of that open world forever. The reason why I bring up the Megaton example is, when the hell, really try to think of a equivalent situation or scenario to Megaton in a recent open world game. I can't even think of one. The fact that you have the option to nuke a small town and forever physically alter that part of the map in the open world is incredible. As a player, it's incredible. And it's quite astonishing, to be quite frank with you. I think when you're able to physically alter or just change a part of an open world for good, period, without being able to turn back, I just think that really just shows how in depth the open world truly is. That just creates a whole nother layer to the realm of possibilities for the player indulging and immersing in this world. I think when you allow for the player to do things in the open world to where it can drastically change something forever, it just really gives a sense of power and a sense of holy shit, this is freaking awesome. Not enough open world games allow the player to do things like that, and it's a shame. It really is a shame. It was so crazy, how many options Fallout 3 gave you where you felt impactful as a player. You felt like you mattered in the world, for better or for worse, I don't know. And then the whole karma aspect to it, right? You blew up Megaton and now so many people look at you like you're the fucking devil himself, that was just amazing in itself. Wow, I did something bad and now a good chunk of the people in this world look at me terribly. That contributes to the world feeling more lively, more realistic. It's just awesome, man. It's just awesome. And I really wish there were more choices in open world games like Megaton, where you can make a choice that can physically forever alter something or just change something, period, and you can't go back. And now the game moving forward is forever different from the way it was before you made that choice. You know what I mean? So I just think, yeah. I mean, can we look at this? Okay. This is where you detonate. Dude, I mean, I'm amazed just watching it right now. Years and years and years later. Holy shit, dude. That's insane. Like, you see what I'm saying? And now this part of the area is completely fucked up forever. And you did that. You are to blame for that. You know, an entire town with tons of innocent people forever vanished because of a choice that you made in the open world. You know, like it's insane. Like that the player, it's just crazy that the player has that much power. It's crazy that the player has the ability to make a choice like that with a drastic outcome of that nature. You know what I mean? I hope I'm making sense here, but yeah, man, like we need more choices that can permanently alter things, you know, like, I mean, just watching that in 2024 still blows me away. Like, wow, I did, like, you did that, you know? So yeah, we just need more opportunities, more scenarios where the player can permanently alter things in the open world, because that will ultimately give the player the feeling that they have a significant amount of importance in the world because of the choices that they can make, for better or for worse. Anyway, I'm probably rambling on and on, but yeah, it's just really cool, man, when an open world has scenarios like that for you to indulge in. It truly makes a game very memorable. So yeah. Let's talk about worthwhile loot. Hey, we got Havo set right here, and we have the Sarugami Samurai set from Ghost of Tsushima. By the way, I took this photo. I'm really proud of this. Look how badass this photo is, man. So sick. Worthwhile loot. I think the biggest middle finger you can give to your players in an open world game is unfortunately something that Dragon's Dogma 2 is guilty of doing. And it sucks because I really love Dragon's Dogma 2 for the most part, but my god is it a flawed game. Which is having piss poor loot scattered all throughout the open world and leaving all of the good items and armor left in shops for players to buy early on in the game. When you do something like this, it heavily discourages players to wander throughout your world. Because one of the key reasonings for exploration is getting unique and powerful loot. We see it all the time in RPGs and other open world games, and it makes sense why. The player should be rewarded for finding a cave or a dungeon that was hard to find. It incentivizes exploration, or at least gives them another reason to explore. Ghost of Tsushima does this right, as it rewards the player for exploration with great loot. For example, going out of your way to complete the Black Hand Riku side quest grants one of the sexiest looking armor sets in the game. And it also grants the player a set of buffs that completely changes the way the game can be played. Worthwhile loot is so imperative in an open world because it incentivizes the player to explore and feel as though their time exploring was not pointless. Let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2, okay? Dragon's Dogma 2 is guilty of doing what I just mentioned. Dragon's Dogma 2 has a beautiful, vast open world. I genuinely loved exploring the open world of Dragon's Dogma 2. But one of the drawbacks of that open world is that all of the awesome loot, all of the awesome weapons, armor, all the powerful dope shit is found in shops, not in the actual open world itself, and that is a damn shame. It should be the complete opposite. You should be able to find dope, powerful shit in the open world, right? You shouldn't just confine it to shops, because then it's like, well, what's the point of exploring this open world, man? What's the point of going into that ominous cave? What's the point of going here, going there? What's the point of exploring the world? One of the key reasonings of exploring a world in an open world game is to find really cool, powerful, unique, original looking shit. That was one of the biggest disappointments of Dragon's Dogma 2, you know? Like, there were so many moments where I found a treasure chest and I'm like, oh my God, I'm probably gonna see something dope. I'm probably gonna get something dope. And it was literally just another generic item that I could find in a forest. So sad, so disappointing, can't stress it enough, can't emphasize it enough. If you're gonna have an open world game, make sure that worthwhile loot, okay, like the Havel set as well, honorable mention, can be found and attained by exploring your open world. It is so imperative that if you're going to make an open world game, make sure it has worthwhile loot inside of it for the player to discover and access. Don't have all the good shit in the shops in inner cities. And then in the open world, all you have is just BS. You know, it heavily discourages your player from wandering and exploring the world, because it just raises the question of like, why? For what? You know, like, sure, right? The open world has, you know, maybe it has good collectibles, maybe it has a good photo mode to take photos in, right? Maybe it has great random instances, which DD2 really does. But at the end of the day, worthwhile loot is one of the key, detrimental, vital components of why you're going to explore an open world. And that's just a fact. So we need to make sure, if we're going to craft an open world game, we need to make sure that there is worthwhile loot within it. Okay? I mean, Havel's set is another. I mean, Havel's set, if my memory serves me well, it's found through a hidden wall. And that is a result of exploring. That is a result of going out in the world and finding that secret. And you got rewarded for it. You got one of the best armor sets in the game, which is Havel's set. I can't stress it enough, man. Worthwhile loot is so important, and unfortunately, so many open world games, you know, the worthwhile loot is hidden behind paywalls, behind DLC. It's hidden behind, you can only find it in shops, like in Dragon's Dogma 2. It's just sad, man. And I can't stress with Dragon's Dogma 2, man. It's so sad, because I genuinely found myself wanting to explore every little nook and cranny in Dragon Dogma 2's open world. I genuinely thought the open world was awesome. I loved the map. I thought that I had a good amount of environment variety. I don't know. I just really loved exploring Dragon's Dogma 2, and I just got disappointed time and time again, because I was just not getting the loot that I thought I would be getting by exploring this world. And it's a shame, because I love the open world in Dragon's Dogma 2. I think it has to be the most recent example of an open world game that I actually wanted to explore. But, you know, the whole loot situation really dwindles the power of you know, wanting to explore that open world. So worthwhile loot, very important, can't stress it enough. Let's go to enjoyable method of traversal. Since open worlds can be vast and enormous to explore, it is imperative that the player has an enjoyable experience traversing through the world itself. Things that immediately come to mind is the horseback riding in Ghost of Tsushima, or the myriad of different vehicles you could drive in Rage 2. You want your method of traversal to have weight, to feel good, and give a good sense of speed. This makes the player feel like they are getting places efficiently, and most importantly, if done correctly, an enjoyable experience. Being able to upgrade your method of traversal is also important, as it adds another layer or component to the game itself. Rage 2 gets a lot of harsh criticism as an open world game, but listen, one thing I feel it did beautifully was the overall execution of traversing through the world itself via vehicles, as well as the good amount of upgrades it gave the player for vehicle purposes, right? So this is so important, right? Because an open world is an open space, right? And in order to traverse that open space, you need something that would be enjoyable to partake in, whether it be a car, whether it be a horse, whether it be a spaceship, whatever. You have to make sure that if you're going to develop an open world game, it is so imperative that your method of traversal is fun and feels responsive and feels efficient, right? Because you can have methods of traversals that aren't really enjoyable, right? Like, I don't know, like let's say you're driving a car and it's very slow. The player is not going to feel like I'm getting to point A to point B efficiently. So it's very key that, you have ways of traversing the land in ways that are fun and that are efficient, okay? I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the driving in Rage 2, I thought the driving in Rage 2 was really good. I thought that it felt really good. And, I know a lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about Rage 2, but honestly, I think the gameplay aspect of Rage 2 was phenomenal. Yeah, it definitely didn't have the best fully fleshed out open world, but one cannot deny that the vehicle part, traversing through the actual open world itself was really fun. I mean, using the boosters, like right now, like the boosters that you see right now, I mean, they were just, you really felt like you were in a fast, like futuristic race car, and also I loved the little racetracks that Rage 2 had in its open world. That's another, that falls under mini games, which we already covered in the side content portion of this video. But I can't stress enough how overlooked Rage 2's racing was. It was really felt good. So it's very important for your open world to have an enjoyable method of traversal, because it's an open world. How are you going to get from point A to point B, right? Very important. I mean, I guess you could say fast travel, but you want something other than fast travel. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about a setting that invites variety. Okay? To keep an open world refreshing and interesting, it is key to create one within a setting that is not too limiting creatively. Fallout 3 is a perfect example. Fallout 3 takes place in a post-apocalyptic wasteland many years into the future of mankind. Due to this setting, we are able to witness many different kinds of experiences, enemies, and locations that we typically wouldn't see in, say, a less explorative setting. We are able to get abducted by aliens, like in the Mothership Zeta DLC, witness a nuclear explosion, like in the Megaton example, use futuristic weapons like plasma rifles, laser rifles, and see what Washington, D.C. would look like in ruins. All of these unique experiences wouldn't be feasible in certain settings where realism or historical accuracy matters. By creating an open world and a setting that invites variety, we allow for a wide range of things that the player can experience, creating vast depth in the open world overall. This keeps the player on their toes at all times, preventing things from getting tedious and boresome. This is not a necessity per se for an open world to be good, for an open world game to be good, but I think it just strengthens the open world in terms of versatility of the enemies that we see, the vistas that we see, the experience that we indulge in. I think I used Fallout 3 in this example, right? So Fallout 3 takes place in the Capital Wasteland. What is the Capital Wasteland? I mean, if we didn't have Fallout 3, right, and I just said the Capital Wasteland, a wasteland that takes place in Washington, D.C., your perspective on that wasteland could be drastically different from my perspective. And that allows for a lot of things to occur, right? Why can't there be aliens in a Capital Wasteland? Why can't there be nuclear explosions in a Capital Wasteland? Why can't there be futuristic weapons? You know what I mean? It's so, the setting itself is so wide in terms of creative possibility that it invites variety You know what I mean? It just invites variety. It allows for a multitude of different things to occur in the world. So I think if you're going to make an open world within a setting that invites variety, that allows for a myriad of different things that are drastically different from one another to occur in your game. I just think it really helps the game become... It really contributes to the game having multiple layers. It contributes to the game having more of a... It gives the game more of a chance of attaining original personality, things of that nature. It prevents the game from getting stale or from feeling flat. So yeah, I think it's once again, it's not a necessity for your open world game to be amazing, but I think that it can greatly contribute to the overall project. Yeah, overall. So yeah, let's move on. Let's go to memorable occurrences, okay? Memorable occurrences are imperative in order to establish a legacy for a game, period. But in an open world, they are so important to create because this will differentiate your open world from the rest of them. Think of memorable occurrences as moments in a game where you were left in genuine awe, whether that be because of an epic boss battle that you just nearly died from, or being introduced to an underwater metropolis for the very first time. These moments are essentially what will give your open world an identity, so it is key for it to have an abundance of them. 2007's BioShock, one of my favorite games of all time by the way, had loads of moments that left me in awe and wonder due to its immensely sinister yet atmospheric presentation. This is where a game needs to be as original and creative as possible in order to establish a name for itself. These same occurrences give the player a reason to be a fan of the project overall. So, memorable occurrences are essentially just highlights, it essentially creates a highlight reel for your game, right? So I mentioned BioShock. I can think of so many different examples of 2007's BioShock that left me in genuine awe, and that left me with memories that I will never forget, right? So for example, hopping in that bathysphere, going down into the Atlantic Ocean and seeing Rapture for the first time was one of the most memorable occurrences I've ever had in a video game. We don't have that a lot in a lot of open world games, man. We really don't. A lot of games are just empty and devoid of any life or personality, devoid of any memorable occurrences. I mean, look at Redfall, for example. What a joke of a game that was, So yeah, more open world games need more memorable occurrences because that's ultimately what's going to build an identity for a project. That's what's going to create fandom. And that's what's going to, just leave a mark in your brain, man. Leave a mark in your brain. And unfortunately, so many games are devoid of that. I mean, really think back. What open world game had a memorable occurrence that was equivalent to seeing Rapture for the first time? Like, what open world game of the past 5 years, besides like Cyberpunk 2077, like, what other, I guess like Breath of the Wild and there's a decent amount of them, but there's not a lot of them. A lot of as I said earlier on in this video, a lot of open world games, especially AAA open world games specifically, a lot of them have no personality, no identity, no memorable occurrences, no interesting NPCs. A lot of the vital components that I'm talking about in this video, a lot of current day open world games don't have, man. And it's so sad to see. And that's why I'm making this video, man, because I feel like I literally need to make a flowchart. I literally need to break down what makes an open world game special, because a lot of these developers aren't making them anymore, aren't making open world games that are of quality anymore. So I think that's why I'm making this video, man, is to literally break it down to y'all on what you're doing wrong and what needs to be implemented into an open world game in order for it to stand the test of time and create some kind of legacy. Moving on. Atmospheric OST. Oh man. Original soundtrack. You know, I'm not even gonna, I don't even need to read this. I'm just gonna tell y'all this straight up. So many games, this is not just open world games, period, okay? This is in general. So many video games, cannot talk because I'm so passionate right now, okay? So many video games today have forgettable OSTs, man. I mean, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I mean, I don't even remember any soundtracks specifically in those games where I was like, oh my God, I want to listen to that on my free time. You want to know why? Because a lot of video games today, when it comes to their OSTs, they're so generic. They use the same instrument choices. They don't take enough risks. They don't sound different. If you listen to any soundtrack from Metroid Prime, if you listen to any soundtrack from Devil May Cry 1, if you listen to any soundtrack from Metal Gear Solid 3, from Cult of the Lamb has one of the best OSTs ever. If you listen Secunda from Skyrim, Resident Evil 4, if you listen to any of these OSTs, one thing that you will realize is that all of them have personality, all of them are taking risks instrumentally, and all of them have little intricacies that give them personality and memorability. Something that is drastically lacking in a lot of games today. Fuck open world games. I'm just talking about video games, period, now. OSTs are so lacking, man. And also melodies. Like, I find that a lot of video games today are, approaching melodies the same. A lot of melodies sound similar to one another, Just not enough risks are being taken in soundtracks today, man. And it's just so sad to see. It's so sad to witness, because I'm going to be honest, I think music is so overlooked in video games today. If your game has a memorable OST, I promise you that will truly elevate your game to stardom. Because I know some people, man, that don't even listen to music. They only listen like music, like what's on the radio and stuff. They don't listen to I know people who only listen to OSTs. They don't even listen to music on the radio or anything like that, because the OSTs are just that good, that original, that different. And unfortunately, a lot of games are just not taking enough risks musically, man. If you listen to any track from Metroid Prime, every track, I truly feel like I was on a different planet. The game it's a sci-fi game. And when I listen to each soundtrack in that game, it just drives home the feeling of really being on a different planet. Because of the way the melodies are constructed, because of the little intricacies that are in each track, because of the instrument choices. That is what's so amazing about Metroid Prime and all of these games that I listed right here. So we need more atmospheric OSTs. It's what's going to give your game so much of an identity. I really think sound design and sound period and music period in games, it's just so overlooked. It is so imperative that we put more emphasis on OSTs and the quality of OSTs and the originality of OSTs, because that's what's going to it's just going to further make your game stand out from the rest of them. Okay? So that's a whole nother video I can make, but I'm gonna stop it right there. Okay. Lastly, guys, I believe, is this the last one? Yep, this is the last component of the main content section, and this is the last component, period, of my little flowchart here. No degradation. In general, I am not a fan of degradation as a game mechanic, especially weapon degradation, like in the case of the latest Zelda games. I could never get into them. Degradation is an annoyance to the player. It interrupts the player from having fun. It prevents them from enjoying the tools and the weapons that they work so hard to attain in the world. I mean, boss weapons, for example, and 2011's Dark Souls. I have examples here. The Moonlight Greatsword, the Life Hunt Scythe, Quelaag's Fury Sword. Dude, all of these weapons would have been so fucking badass to use. But you know why they're not badass to use? Because they break so easily because of the weapon degradation system in Dark Souls. Now, thankfully, Dark Souls 3, starting at Dark Souls 3, they let go of that. But, oh my god, man. And Dark Souls 2, it wasn't as bad. There were ways to get around it in Dark Souls 2, so it wasn't that bad. But dude, I would have loved Dark Souls 1 so much more if weapon degradation wasn't a thing. Weapon degradation is just... Now look, I get it. They added it because, you know, a lot of boss weapons in Dark Souls 1 are pretty fucking OP. I mean, think about it. Like, if they didn't have weapon degradation, I mean, you could literally just, like, spam your weapon arts throughout the entire game. But they ended up doing that anyway in Dark Souls 3 and in Elden Ring. And in Bloodborne. So, what difference does it make? And also, when you're OP, sometimes when you're OP in an open world game, it feels good, man. And honestly, I think it warrants it. You know, like, I think if you put so much time and effort in leveling up your character and attaining a weapon, you know, like a boss weapon by beating a crazy boss, I think you are allowed. I think you should be rewarded for being OP. I think you should be rewarded to be OP. Like, that should be your reward. You know what I mean? Because, like, you put so much time and effort into, you know, making your character better by leveling up and by attaining these hard weapons that were hard to get. So, you know, I think that should be the reward, to be able to spam those weapon arts and you know, just obliterate everything in your path, you know? But I hate weapon degradation, man. I hate degradation, period. I think it's just a shitty game mechanic. I don't think it's fun. I think it just prevents the player from having favorite weapons in a game, or favorite items, or whatever, you know? I think degradation is a mechanic that sounds good on paper, but, like, in actuality, it's just more of an annoyance than anything. Right? So, no degradation. Like Dead Island 2, for example. Dead Island 2 is a phenomenal zombie game, by the way, if you guys have never played it. Like, Dead Island 2 is awesome. But unfortunately, maybe we could even add Dead Island 2 as a honorable mention here. So, Dead Island 2, right, actually has a weapon degradation system. Here we go. Here's some Dead Island 2 gifts. So, Dead Island 2 has a weapon degradation system, unfortunately. Okay? And I can't tell you how much I hate that. I have to constantly be repairing my weapon over and over and over again. It just sucks, man. You know, when the game could be so much more fun if there wasn't a weapon degradation system. So, you know, I think that needs to be said more. No weapon degradation. It's not fun. It's not cool. It just sucks, you know? So, personally, I'm not... There we go. There's Dead Island 2. Like, for example, right? This weapon right here, he's using... It looks like an electric or like a incendiary machete or something like that. After a while, that weapon is gonna wear off, and the durability is gonna wear off. It's gonna get weakened the more you use it, you know, and that just sucks, you know, because I think if you put in the time to make that weapon and craft that weapon and locate the resources in order to make that weapon, you know, that's a lot of time that you put in to make that weapon, and now you're gonna tell me after a couple of swings it's gonna break? That just sucks. You know what I mean? So yeah, Dead Island 2 does this. Dark Souls 1 does this. Breath of the Wild does this. I'm just not a fan of it. I freaking hate it. Honestly, I think in Dark Souls 1, I think there's actually a mod to prevent that from happening, which is awesome if you're a PC player like me, right? But you know, that redeems that poor choice of weapon degradation. But you know, in games like Dead Island 2 and well, maybe Dead Island 2 has mods, I don't know. But like, you know, in the Legend of Zelda games, it's like that's part of the game's mechanics. That's part of the game's DNA forever. No mod, no nothing can fix that because it's a Nintendo game, you know? So it just sucks. I think weapon degradation sucks, man. It just prevents the player from using certain items and certain weapons when they could have, you know, that were actually fun to use, you know? So I don't like it. So that's what I have to say about that. So anyway, guys, that's basically the end of this video. That's my little video essay. That's my little take on what I think would make the perfect open world game, side content and main content. I hope you guys loved this flowchart that I made for all of you. I really put my heart and soul into making this flowchart and really breaking down, you know, what can truly make an open world game awesome. And the reason why I did this, guys, is because I genuinely love open world games. I'm actually going to college to be a game developer myself. I'm inches away from getting my BFA in studio art, and I'm going to apply that degree in game development. I have one more semester to go, so that's why I'm so passionate about this stuff, man. Because one, it's going to be my career sooner than later, and also, you know, I just think we lost the plot. I think we forgot what makes an open world game so special and so awesome and so memorable. So hopefully by making this flowchart, I listed at least, if not all, at least I listed some of the vital components that could truly make, you know, a open world game special and amazing. You know, we need to make open world games great again. You know what I mean? Yeah, a lot of them are just convoluted with so much bullshit. They're lacking. They're just barren wastelands, and that aren't awesome, like the Capital Wasteland. That don't have nowhere near as much content as the Capital Wasteland. So yeah, you know, I mean, I digress. I think I'm rambling on, but that's why I did this video, guys. I'm just so passionate about this, and you know, I want specifically AAA open world games to become great again. And you know, I truly think that open world games can truly be, you know, works of art if they're developed and done properly, if they're executed properly and efficiently. But unfortunately, I just think a lot of games are just open world today just for the sake of being open world, just for the sake of just selling a quick buck, you know, because open world games are very marketable, they're very in today, but unfortunately, a lot of the ones that are being developed today are just devoid of any persona, any life, any memorability, and they're devoid of a lot of these vital components that I just went over with you guys one by one today. So guys, if you loved the video, feel free to subscribe, like, comment. Let me know if I'm forgetting something. Let me know what's your favorite open world game, and you know why it's, you know, that's your favorite open world game, and also like what can we do to make open world games better, you know? So yeah, guys, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching my little video essay. Peace out, guys. My name is Craig, and it was a pleasure. Peace.